Although our mother reluctantly agreed, it seemed easier for Annie and her lover to be together. But for Lorna and me, there wasn't much change except feeling more peaceful and less guilty. Our chances to meet and talk happily were reduced for now. Even though Mother didn't know about my narrow escape from Carver Doone, she made me promise not to risk my life with unnecessary visits. She trusted me to decide when it was necessary to visit, but I couldn't promise to tell her beforehand. I knew how sad she'd be during my absence, so instead, I promised to tell her all about my adventures when I returned. My mother immediately started thinking of ways to protect me from danger and ease her own worries. She had plans to rescue Lorna from the dunes and have her live with us for a year. She wanted Lorna to learn about running a dairy and farm life and how to pack butter. This all started because I mentioned how much Lorna wanted a quiet life away from violence. Thinking of my dear mother, who's now in heaven, I often feel teary remembering her kindness and warmth. Trying to rescue Lorna from Glen Doone wasn't impossible for me, but first, would she leave her old grandfather who needed her? And even if she agreed to leave because of Carver and the evil counselor, could we keep her safe without an army? The Dunes would surely search for their queen, find her, burn our house, and harm us. I told all this to my mother, and she agreed that, for now, I should watch over Lorna from a safe distance and wait for things to change. Meanwhile, Mother hinted I might fall in love with another girl, a peaceful heiress who was often around. I didn't like that idea at all. Mother smiled and said, "It's not up to me. God knows what's best. We can't control who we love or I wouldn't be here today. And I'm glad Uncle Reuben's plan failed. He called my son a coward for not joining a dangerous plan against the valley that sheltered his beloved. Yet my coward risks his life every day without telling anyone. I'm glad you won't marry that little rude granddaughter of the old miser, no matter how rich she is." Suddenly, poor Ruth Huckaback stood beside Mother, looking sad as she heard these words. She spoke calmly, saying, "It's not my fault I'm small. God made me this way. I didn't know you looked down on me because of it. And you never told my grandfather he's an old miser, at least not when I could hear. When I return to Dulverton, which I plan to do tomorrow since today is too late, I won't tell my grandfather what you think of him. I don't want to spoil any plans you might have for his property. Thank you all for being so kind to me, much more than I, a small person, could expect. I'll add one more thing for your information. My grandfather might not leave me any of his money if I upset him, which I would do in a moment for an honest and brave man." Here she glanced at me in a way that confused me. "He's very strict, and sometimes I wish he wouldn't leave me anything. The money causes me so many problems." She broke down, cried, said a faint goodbye, and ran off. We looked at each other and felt like we had lost. "Bold little dwarf," my mother finally said, after catching her breath. "Oh, John, you should be so thankful. What a life she would have given you." "Really," Annie said, hugging poor Mother. "Who would have thought that tiny girl had such a bold spirit? I can't believe she hid it so well. So you'd think she was an angel." "I have to admit," I laughed, "I never liked Ruth Huckaback as much as I do now. She's quite something. I would have married her tomorrow if I hadn't met Lorna. I would have been nothing in my own house." My mother said, "I can't thank Lorna enough for saving me. Did you see her eyes flash?" "I did, and they were amazing." Most girls would have pretended they didn't hear anything and been mean. Annie, would you have done that? I think so, said Annie. Though I don't know. I would have been embarrassed to hear something that wasn't meant for me and been mad at myself. You would have, my mother said. Any daughter of mine would do that instead of saying mean things. But I'm sorry my words upset that poor girl. I'll say sorry before she goes and expect her to apologize. She won't, I said. She's very strong and was right, even though she heard it by accident. I might have said the same, and she was mad at you, Mother. We didn't say more about it, and the next morning, Ruth left us, even though we didn't want her to. She said she'd be good friends with my sister Eliza and looked mad at Annie when they said goodbye because she was so tall. At least Annie thought so, but she might have been wrong. I rode with Ruth until we passed Exeford and left her with John Fry because of all the talk about her money. She cried when she said goodbye and sent a nice message to my mother. She said she'd come again at Christmas if she was allowed. I thought Ruth did really well for a girl who was upset. She had spirit and pride and tried to forgive, which is very hard for a woman outside of her family. After that, nothing much happened for a month except I needed to see Lorna after talking to my mother. She kissed me sweetly. She always did when she kissed. And I asked for one more kiss for my mother and got it. I won't tell what else she said, even if anyone cared, because it's just for us. One thing she said that I made sure to tell my mother and Annie was this. I can't believe, dear John, that after all the crime and trouble caused by my wild family, I'll ever be able to settle into peace and comfort in a simple home. I long for home with all my heart. Any home, even if it's plain and boring to others, would be paradise to me, as long as it's free from fighting and trouble, and somewhere I can call my own. When I told her how much my mother, Annie, and I wanted her at Plover's Barrows to teach her peaceful tasks that she'd enjoy, she blushed and said she'd never leave her grandfather while he's alive. Even if she were free, her family would ruin any home that took her in. It was clear, and seeing how sad I was, she bravely told me we must hope for better times and asked how long I'd wait for her. Not a day if I could help it, I said warmly, which made her turn away shyly and not look at me for a while. But all my life if I have to. How long would you wait for me, Lorna? I'll wait until I can have you, she answered slyly, with a smile that meant more to me than any joke. And now, John, you've tied me to you with a beautiful ring, which I can't wear but keep close to my heart. But I'll tie you to me, my dearest, with the plainest ring you've ever seen. I could give you 50 nicer ones, but they wouldn't be honest. I love you for your honesty, of course, John, so don't get conceited. Look at it. How odd. It has strange old marks, almost like a cat in a tree. But it doesn't matter what it looks like. It must have been a giant's ring, so it might fit you, Giant John. It's been on my old glass necklace, which my grandfather got back for me after someone took it away. Since before I can remember, and even longer, as some lady once told me. Now, you look very surprised. What do you think of it? It's worth 50 of the pearl ring I gave you, my darling, and I won't take it back. Then you'll never have me. I won't have anything to do with a gentleman. No gentleman, dear, a farmer. Very well, a farmer. Nothing to do with a farmer who won't accept my love token. So please, give it back and take your lovely ring. She looked at me in a way that was partly serious, partly teasing, and 3 times as loving. Despite my good intentions and her weak protests, I couldn't help but abandon my plans and kiss her until she blushed and rested her head on my chest, her dark hair falling around us. Then I put the pearl ring back on her finger and put the heavy hoop she gave me on my smallest finger. I was pleased with it until she recovered and I started talking seriously to distract her from scolding me. "Mistress Lorna, this isn't a giant's ring. It's just a very old thumb ring, like one found on our farm in my father's time. We sent it to smart people who explained it but kept the ring. I'll keep it, my love, and take it to my grave. And I will unless someone dares to steal it from the dead." Now, I mention the ring, even though I didn't plan to, because it's important to Lorna's story. I asked where the glass necklace was that the ring came from, and she said she didn't know. She remembered her grandfather asking for it when she was about 10 and promising to keep it safe until she could look after it. He gave her back the ring and told her to be proud of it. She always had been, and now she took it from her chest and gave it to John Ridd to enjoy. I told my mother most of this like I promised, and she was pleased with Lorna for being so good to me and talking so sensibly. She looked at the big gold ring but couldn't understand it. She was sure, and so was I, that it belonged to important, high-ranking people in the past. I wanted to take it off because it wasn't fit for a farmer, but she said no with tears in her eyes. If a farmer got the lady of an important family, what do rings and old-fashioned trinkets matter next to the living gem? I agreed with her and loved the ring, even though it had no gem, as a symbol of my precious gem. I decided to wear it all the time except when I plowed or did things that might break it. Even though it felt strange on my finger, I'd never worn one before, and looked odd on my big, hard-working hand. Before I got used to my ring and people got used to seeing it on me, plain and simple as it was, something else happened that was unpleasant and confusing.